Our reading today came from the book of Matthew, chapter 15, verses 32 through 39. And our first lesson was from Exodus, chapter 16, verses 2 through 15 and 31 through 35. If you'd like to read that before getting familiar with the sermon, feel free to go ahead. I'll be here when you get back. Now, if today's gospel reading sounded familiar to you, it may be because this past Sunday, the seventh Sunday in Pentecost, the gospel reading came from Matthew 14 and was about the feeding of the 5,000. Now, having just read it 3 days ago, it shouldn't be hard for us to remember the details. It has gotten late. The disciples express concern about the crowd of people leaving in time to eat. Jesus tells his disciples to feed them. They respond they have a small amount of bread and fish. Jesus blesses the food, and they distribute it among the men, who number 5,000, as well as unnumbered women and children. All are fed, and plenty is left over. After that, Jesus walks on water, heals the sick at Gennesaret, teaches the Pharisees about the traditions of the elders, presents a parable on defilement, heals the daughter of a Canaanite woman, and then heals the sick beside the Sea of Galilee, where he is once again concerned over the well-being of the hordes of people that have been following him. Jesus says he is compassionate for them, and that they have been with him for 3 days, are hungry, and should not be sent away without food. Now, I don't know whether it's the heat or the days of traveling back and forth across the Sea of Galilee, or maybe it's just the long hours they've been keeping watching over all these people, but that's getting to them. But the disciples respond as if this has never happened before. Jesus, we don't have enough food to feed this many people. Now, I don't know about you, but I tend to be impatient when confronted with people who continually forget things, especially those who are closest to me. Now, my lack of tolerance is probably due to the fact that I suffer from a mild memory loss myself, which is due less to a lack of retention than it is to a lack of attention. I was with a group of people recently and introduced to this fellow who told me his name, but I was so swept up with the conversation that we were having, I had to ask him again 15 minutes later. Now, 5 minutes after that, I'd realized that I was so caught up in the embarrassment of having to ask him his name again that I hadn't actually retained his name when he told me the second time, and decided to forego embarrassing myself again and asked a friend later on what his name was. I don't think I remember his name right now either. In 1994, when I was 27 years old, I was diagnosed with ADHD, commonly known as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I've had it all my childhood and a good deal of my adult life before I turned 27 and found out that I had it, which means that I suffered through the symptoms of it without being able to put a name to it. And even since, there's no cure for ADHD, so many people take medication. I have taken medication, but I prefer to work with the symptoms I have using learning strategies and to deal with or otherwise manage the more egregious symptoms of it. I've come a long way with actively being able to maintain attention, especially in public or pastoral or work or any type of settings where I need to maintain a level of decorum. But in the comforts of my own home, around close friends, family members, I kind of get tired of always having to pay attention to how I'm acting, and I can frequently miss things. Just a few days ago, when I got back home here to my mother's house in West Columbia, I was taking things out of my pocket and realized that there was a door key that actually belonged to the computer lab at the Heritage at Lowman, next to the CPE office, and in case people needed to get in there. And since I remember distinctly intending to put that key right back to where it belonged, I couldn't understand for the life of me why it was even in my pocket in the first place. And hoping nobody else would need to use it, I still got angry and frustrated at myself for having neglected to follow through with my intention of putting the key back where it belonged. I've spent a lifetime dealing with these kind of embarrassing moments of shame and guilt like those, and coming back and beating up myself about it, because it's really hard to forgive myself because nobody else has memory lapses and does things like that, right? Well, except for the Israelites in our reading from Exodus. Here they are, coming out of Egypt with the Lord through Moses, performing miracle after miracle, like the 10 plagues, like parting the Red Sea, vanquishing the armies of Pharaoh, making a pool of bitter water into drinkable water just by throwing a log of wood into it. Moses did all these things in the presence of his people. So now the Lord instructs Moses to bring his people out into the wilderness of Sin. And all of these people who have seen all of these miracles before can't seem to remember anything from one day to the next. And say to him, it would have been better to kill us than bring us to this wasteland just to let us starve to death. Why has God led us to this wasteland just to starve us to death? But does God become angry and frustrated with his forgetful people? Now, God does a lot of things, especially in the Old Testament, but does he smite them with a plague and boils for becoming weary of walking, tired in the wilderness, losing faith and forgetting that he, the Lord, has done miracles and continue to provide? No, God actually graciously provides for them with a new miracle. A feast of quail every night, and a strange new bread called manna every morning, keeping his people from starving out there in the wilderness. As for Christ's disciples, during the feeding of 4,000, this is also how the Lord responds. When he could have rebuked them for being so forgetful, for having completely eliminated the details of the last miracle of feeding, Christ is kind, warm, and gentle with them, and simply smiling as if this hasn't come up before. And he just asks them for the food that they already have with them. Christ takes the 7 loaves and small pieces of fish from them. He blesses them, and all the people are fed with food to spare. Now, we can use the term wilderness in any number of different ways. People go through periods that can be described as wildernesses. I have myself feeling isolated and alone, and I know from my own experience, I'm too worried about being able to find my way, and I'm too tired to think about more than just being able to survive. It's not always easy for me to remember at those moments that miracles are possible. And God is kind and understanding with people like me when we fail to remember who he is and what he has done for us. He still remains the loving Father of his people, and he provides for them the level of care needed to sustain them. God is kind and compassionate when we are forgetful. Why can't you or I be that way? If I've learned nothing else during my summer of clinical pastoral education, I have learned that if you ask me my name and I tell you once, and then 5 minutes later you ask me my name again, and I tell you again, and if you ask me 15 minutes later, and even an hour later than that, and you ask me, and I will tell you again, and it's okay. And I'll smile and just respond. I can be patient. And if I can treat myself with that same kindness and that same patience for being forgetful, if I can treat you with that same kindness and patience for being forgetful, then why can't I treat myself the same way? I think we can all treat ourselves and each other the way that God treats us. Amen.